Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and today with me is Vox. Vox, how are you?
Doing well.
That's good. So we just finished streaming the Star Trek: The Next Generation episode, "A Matter of Perspective," and I think it was going to be between that and maybe Chain of Command, the one where it gets towards it. And so what inspired this was Christopher Maute had wanted to. Well, he and I were talking, and I somehow in the conversation we were talking about perspective, and we're talking about this show coming up on Rorschach, the Rorschach, how human beings are their own Rorschach, and so I said, "Hey, you're going to love this episode." And so we did it. And I guess before, and I know every second that I leave him in the back, I'm going to pay for it tenfold. So he is waiting. He's standing by. We're about to bring him out. But I wanted to warn you that I got the impression he was not as impressed with it. And keep in mind, he's a subtle guy. He's full of nuance. He's full of just subtlety, and he's a very so it's just because I happen to know him pretty well by this point, I think, that I detected some tones of being displeased with that episode. So yeah, yeah, exactly. So now that we've established that, why don't I bring Chris out here and we'll talk about the episode. And hello, hello there. Okay. Hello, Chris.
Nick?
Yes.
We're not friends
Oh, jeez.
until our next hang.
Oh, okay.
We're allowed to be friends, so I can yell at you for the
Oh,
duration of this hang. But between now and the next hang, do not, under any circumstances, contact me. There
So
is
there's
a
moratorium on our friendship. Okay.
There is a lack of connection where you thought that episode of that piece of fucking shit in the country of stupid on planet science, what the fuck? In the galaxy of who cares? That's what the fuck you're going to introduce Star Trek to me with? Since you haven't brought it up yet, let me do it for you.
Okay.
My wife, Shanna, nay, Rocky, currently Maute. When we first moved in together, Shanna loves Doctor Who. God, she loves Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. People love Doctor Who. She's like, listen, I love Doctor Who. And I'm like, cool, I love Doctor Who, whatever. Yeah, I love that you love Doctor Who. Let me play an episode for you. All right. Sounds good. I'm expecting like, I don't know, 30 minutes. 30 minutes minus commercials, 25, 20. Right?
Okay.
It's the Christmas special from 1980. I don't fucking care. After 15 minutes, I start fidgeting to the point where it's like, man, cool, 5 more minutes, right? No, it's the Christmas motherfucking special. This shit is no commercials, a solid 60 minutes. At 20 minutes, I start squirming. At 30, I'm visibly uncomfortable. And for the next 30 minutes, she just kept looking at me like, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm like, it's not that this isn't entertaining, but it's not entertaining in the way that I think it's meant to be entertaining.
Okay.
I can't quite wrap my head around this, right? And she's like, cool. I will never in my life show you an episode of fucking Doctor Who. I bring that up for a reason.
Okay.
And that reason pretty much has to do with Star Trek: The Next Generation. Next Generation NG. Whenever you see Star Trek NG, please don't think next generation. Just think not good.
Who? Oh,
After this hangout, we are not friends. We are not. Don't talk to me.
What? Wow. Okay.
Reference me. Think about me until our next hangout. That was horrible. It addressed a really fun point until some fucking legislator from another planet in another galaxy said, heretofore. Cool. Ancient romantic English made its way across the fucking solar system. Give me a goddamn break.
Well,
this was the most lazy writing piece of shit version of what could have been awesome. It had good points. Let me get the venom out. And then we get to focus on the good stuff.
I'm just curious if Steve knows your views, because as I recall, he streams on Star Trek.
I can't wait to scream at two chimes.
Okay, just asking. Okay.
I let him know in Skype that this was happening. And he chose, for some reason, not to join us.
Okay.
That being said, all right, let's address as poorly executed as this was, and this was poorly executed. Horrible. Let me explain something. In the plot of this episode, Riker, who's not even fucking Italian or looks Italian, is like the stud of the intergalactic universe. Fuck that noise. This fucking chooch. Oh, it was worse than like the Buck Rogers. It was the stupid Buck Rogers cherry on the Sunday of Flash Gordon that never existed on the shit planet of who the fuck cares. L. Ron Hubbard wrote this.
Oh, gee. Wow. Yeah, okay.
I'm done. I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done.
Well, good, because I was going to ask you what your real opinion is, but and Vox seems to have lost her connection, so hopefully she will be back. But I think I may have overstated your subtlety on this issue a touch. So
I appreciate sophistication and nuance. I appreciate all these things. What I particularly appreciate about them is that they facilitate a conversation that allows me to explain how shitty that fucking episode was. It was dumb. It was the skinniest kid at fat camp on planet who gives a fuck.
All right. I'm
done.
Okay, perfect. So
although the topic was fantastical, man, if only they were able to thread that needle. If only the writers weren't on strike, I guess, during that fucking episode. Holy shit, that sucked.
All right. So so I think I have managed to parse Maute's perspective on this one. So Vox, I think you and I are going to have a slightly different point of view, though I grant it's
wrong.
cheesy.
I think the wrong fucking perspective.
For the time, I think it was so. Now Vox, you've seen it before. Oh, you are muted, and are you muted? You were not muted on. Let me try to. Oh, there we go. Let me see if I can. This says your mic is not connected. And we appear to have also lost Vox. So I won't opine on the irony of somebody named Vox who has a microphone that won't connect.
No Vox.
No Vox. So,
Vox is
all right.
This is not A.
So let's see if we can find anything good. At a minimum, you liked the idea. So,
hey man, I like the idea of fucking Johnny Depp version of Willy Wonka. I like the idea.
All right, how's that working? Can you hear me
Much better.
now?
Much better.
Yes,
Oh.
we can.
Oh,
No.
God
So
damn it. I was hoping to get more rant in. You
so
fucked it all up. All right, let's go. You
so
fucked it all up. All right, let's go.
Aw.
Oh,
Yeah, well,
well,
I told you that like my ability to do technology is basically like, hey, can you do this for me? So apparently I didn't click out of the Discord chat. And so the things were trying to share microphone and yeah. So
okay, so now you actually had to watch you had to watch this for a class, did you not, Vox?
yeah, so when I was L2, we had to watch this episode. Oh well, I didn't say we had to. The professor, it was an international law class, and so he played this for us because it does have a little bit of international significance to it, specifically dealing with extradition and possibly an application of diplomatic immunity, or at least an argument to rescind diplomatic immunity, or something like that. And so we watched it, and I agree, it's cheesy. It's kind of it's kind of written kind of cheesy, but I mean that's that. So Star Trek: The Next
Can I
Generation.
turn off his camera from here? You may want to also affect the mic, but I think he's being a little. All right.
Well,
so you're saying
I do agree that I love Star Trek. I love everything about Star Trek. Like I will tell you how Star Trek is the most superior sci-fi ever written. And it makes Star Wars look like just this tiny little thing that children tried to put together. Like I'll go into all the
them's fighting words in a number of communities.
Damn shit. See, I don't want to argue with you. I just want to bust fucking next jobs.
Right. But this is
like I'll happily listen to you and be like, those are awesome points. God, those are great.
But you know what?
It's a shame that Nick also likes
this
fucking son of a.
This was not the episode. Like, I didn't know that Chris had never watched The Next Generation. This is not the episode.
It's like it was like a casual thing because like I grew up where it was like on USA Network, I think.
Sure.
Like I was used to like not only the fresh episodes, but the what do they call it? In syndicate, in syndication.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I remember like all that shit, just like it being a regular, like marathons, a fucking Star Trek New Generation.
Sure, yeah.
Next Generation.
Well, and he knew the characters, so I was telling him the sort of basics. He's like, okay, yeah, he knows who Riker is, So I mean, I figured A, he knew the characters, and B, he could obviously overcome his own biases to actually enjoy what was otherwise a good episode. Now, it's not my fault.
Did enjoy it while I was boiling eggs, while I was making hard eggs.
I will say this. I also agree. I have never understood, and I mean, I know we'll eventually get into the reason why we actually picked this particular episode, and it's actually a good episode to have watched based on what we're going through with the election and everything like that, and and I'll get into that in a minute here. Yes. But Riker as a
leading man,
as a sex
Bill
symbol.
Gerard. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, as a sex symbol, like Patrick Stewart is one of the sexiest men alive.
Young and sexy. What a fucking goddamn handsome version of goddamn Patrick Stewart, like fucking Picard.
I mean, he is even now. I mean, and he's getting older. And I know people like, it's like, you imagine like I'm 35, right? Picard's like going on like Patrick Stewart's gone on 80. I would still rock that man's world. Like, I mean, but to look at him now, I mean, he's just there's your leading man. There's your sexy man. Picard, Riker is just like a dad bod with a beard.
Dad bod.
No, wait. You know what? On behalf of people, because I was looking at the beard actually during I was just like, that cut looks awfully familiar to me. I was just like, but I guess I'm. That's okay. That's okay. I'm trying not to take this too personally.
I mean, like, think about it. You take and look, I think all bodies are beautiful, right? But you take a dad bod in a beard and you put it in.
Yes, and not no.
Yes, and yes,
you're walking this back now. You're walking this back now that okay, I get it.
And
but you put that like they wear jumpsuits, right? I mean, like spandex is a privilege, okay?
Well,
And
it's
so,
basically
so are
one-
Lycra. What are they called? Boosty. They're not bustiers. They're the fucking. They What the fuck? You know what? It is a piece of clothing that you wrap around your waist so that it tightens it up. What is that called?
Corset.
Of course.
Corset. Thank you.
Corset.
Like
Yes.
Bill Shatner, of course, was wearing one of those. He was
Yeah, I
rocking one of
think-
those
Yeah.
towards the later movies, right?
They call they call it something else for guys, a girdle. They call it a girdle.
Girdle. Thank you. I think that's the word I was looking for.
Yes,
Both
they
of
call
them
it a
work. Yeah,
girdle.
yeah.
So but yeah, so now
Somebody-
but like
Whoever no name is
Star Trek is
has
supposed
a
to
deep
be
understanding of this.
I think cheesy, right? I think part of Star Trek is to be cheesy. It's kind of like it evolved, right? So the original series is just very spaghetti western. It's like space spaghetti western, you know. The Next Generation tried to get away from that, but it really didn't succeed until about the 4th or the 5th season, and then that gave us Deep Space Nine, which Deep Space Nine is just, I mean, that's my favorite Star Trek. Like, Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek. But why is this episode important? Well, look at what we've got going on right now. So, a matter of perspective was something that happens, right?
Hold on, one moment. I'm
yeah.
gonna while you are transitioning through that, I'm going to grab myself another beverage because we're done with the phase where I'm busting chops, right? Like, you know, the whole Star Trek, it was cheesy, this, that, and the other. The points that it brings up are stellar. So let's focus on those. When I come back, I will be totally ready to change channels. I will be in psychology mode. I will stop lambasting the fucking execution, the horrible execution of this fantastic idea, and we will focus on the fantastic idea.
Perfect. All right, go get your beverage. All right, box.
Well,
$5 says he doesn't last 5 minutes. $5.
Oh.
Right, you and I right now. He doesn't last 5 minutes when we get back. Just okay. $5.
I have faith in him. I have faith.
Okay,
in him.
good. So we're
I
on.
do have faith.
Keep
the faith. Keep the
$5.
faith.
You and I.
Isn't
will
that
All
what
right.
the
we'll see. I'm starting the clock as soon as the
you
camera
know what,
comes back on.
and you know what, there's another episode of Star Trek that is an interesting thing. Now, I didn't watch this in law school, but the one where Picard is arguing over whether or not that Data
Oh, that's a good one.
deserves to have rights to whether or not Data has agency under the law, and of course, you know, that is something that we still argue now. Of course, not with androids, but diminished capacity law, or if we are to be a representative for someone, and those things are still not entirely well defined in our legal system. So there's a lot of wiggle room for that. So that's that's another one that, you know, Star Trek, it was it's always been very, very good at taking social problems and then viewing them through the light of our better angels, I think
that, and possibly so optimistically that it's unattainable, but it's still something that hopefully is worth aspire. If you don't have something to aspire to, whether you can even attain it or not. So somebody had asked, that was Measure of a Man, and also the one that the Chain of Command, because I started showing that one briefly before we did the other one, and you know, Picard is being tortured, and the torture is reminiscent of 1984. It's really well done. It's that subject is taken pretty seriously, and it's pretty shocking for what you could put on television. I mean, at one point there's a profile of him naked, you know, just sort of just chained up, and you know, by the end, what you find out in the end is, even though it looks like he made it through, they broke him in the end, and that's another one that will. But you know what? I don't know that he deserves to see another one at this point. But. Well, wow. So, all right. So, let's discuss this episode so that we're already in that when he comes back. So, you said in particular about this election, and I mean, for me, what I find interesting, and we're going to be discussing that because we're going to be doing the Rorschach episode coming up, talking about how people their own biases shape how they view reality, and any one any one sentence, any one act can be viewed so many ways depending on what you're bringing to the table, and we all have to bring something. Somebody once described to me life as a movie, and you come into the movie, and the movie's already halfway through, and so you start asking other people to bring you up to date on the plot, and what you realize is, for the most part, they all came in about halfway through too. So it's all the conclusions that they've already reached, and who really knows what's going on. So, anyways, I don't know. I figured I'd do that as a starting point to spin.
Well, so obviously the main premise behind this is about Gettier cases. That's what I've always thought that the main thing is because for a very, very long time, and especially back then, we still kind of relied on like we were still kind of passing out pragmatism, even though Charles Pierce is obviously came around in the early 1900s. We're still kind of passing that out. We still held to at least I think a lot of people still held to correspondence theory of truth. So of course that brings up Gettier cases, which is about perspective. And the more famous Gettier case is just basically the black cow in the field, and the perspective of individual people, and how do we arrive at conclusions that are true based on what we understand to be different perspectives. And of course, the conclusion is not a perspective conclusion. The conclusion is based on empirics. And so we know that stress can cause people to relive things differently, especially trauma. And so, on the one hand, you have Riker telling his side. On the other hand, you have the lady telling her side. She is accusing him of rape at some point, right? And there has to be a fact of the matter about what happened. And so if we look at the election, right, we see, for months and months and months, Donald Trump says voting by mail is going to be fraudulent, right? And so his supporters don't vote by mail. His supporters primarily vote in person. And then, of course, the votes in person get tabulated first, and the votes by mail get tabulated second. And so they see this red to blue shift, and they scream voter fraud. And you ask him, he said, so Donald Trump told you to vote not by mail. So you didn't vote by mail, right? Yeah. And you didn't vote by mail. No, you voted in person, right? But the Democrats voted by mail, right? Yeah. So that's why there's so many things. No, it's fraud, right? And so it's all about how people see a process or see an event, and then what goes into shaping that event. And so in a court system, what's really interesting about the way that this was done is that they had a grand jury almost. But in their setup of the grand jury, they allowed defense and prosecution to both present a case before going to trial. Now, generally speaking, defense doesn't take part in a grand jury. And so we see the difficulty in what we ask jurors to do. And think back to OJ, right? Think about what these jurors had to go through, the different eyewitness testimonies and things like that, and stories from the past, remembering these things, trying to piece them together. Oh, well, you didn't remember it the same as this person remembered it the same, and what is the truth? And then, of course, they have to make a decision. Is this person guilty or is this person innocent? And I think the most important thing to take away from this is that if you ever needed a reason to abolish capital punishment, this is a perfect explanation of why. Because we can never be as sure as they were with that empirical analysis at the end. We don't have that, right? So we can never be sure. And so I think that's the biggest takeaway from this, for me at least.
Well, and I actually wanted to bring up one, and I This is an interesting one. Have you ever heard of Janet Burke and Thomas Hainsworth? Does anyone here know that case? All right.
Not as such, no.
This is one of the most remarkable cases, I think, in American jurisprudence that I'm aware of. Janet Burke was raped, and the image of her rapist seared in her mind. She was able to successfully identify the man out of a lineup, and he was tried and convicted. And after 20 years in prison, it was conclusively proven that he could not have done it. And she spoke with a number of psychologists and a number of people trying to figure out how and why she was so sure it was him when in reality it wasn't. And it's one of those things where now she and he together go and they speak about what happened, where he is essentially the victim of and just real quick, by the way, Chris, what did you think of that episode, just out of curiosity?
Let's see. On a scale of scalarly speaking, from it was dog shit to it was the best fucking thing in the world. It was the dog shit that Satan shits in your stomach after you've eaten.
My timer is going off.
That
counts. That counts. I'm sorry. We didn't say.
I'm not done.
We didn't say I didn't get to ask him.
Done.
Okay, please continue. Please continue. By all means, please continue.
I'm not done.
Please continue.
After you've eaten a chip coated with the spiciest spice, capsaicin, known to man, it is like the dog shit that Satan shits into your stomach when you want to shit the shittiest, spiciest chip that you could shit. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck? Woodchuck could chuck wood. Or, as a thesaurus would say, how much lathe could a woodchuck lob if a woodchuck could sling plank?
All right, Vox. I think that counts. I get my $5. I had 5 seconds left.
Yeah,
I had 5 seconds
there
left.
You go.
Okay.
There you go. I have no idea what's going on.
All right. So all right. So
one question. Yes. One question.
So okay. So anyways, these two now go about on false identification, and she still has nightmares where this man, who she now considers a friend, and they speak on stage together about how bad witness testimony is. She still has nightmares where he's the one who did the rape. And yet she knows he's innocent. She knows her testimony put him in jail for 20 years. And they talk about how she feels about that and about him being the victim of this false identification. And anyways, it's a powerful. I've seen them speak once or twice, and it's Thomas Hayworth and Janet Burke, and they go around speaking together about how poor memory is, and how even to this day she sees him, despite the fact she knows it's not him. It's a powerful and kind of a scary thing, to tell you the truth. I get a little. That's just because we think of our own memories as perfect and impartial, and we think
Hopefully
of our.
we don't. Hopefully we do not.
I think
that's horrible. The way that we should be thinking about memory is the way that I teach it is a reconstruction. We are constructing based on our vague understanding of what happened. Right. So we're always filtering it through what we bring to the experience. And as evidence of this, what I do is I do the I don't know if you know this trick. I'll list a bunch of words. I'll be like, okay, pens down. And I list a bunch of words. And I'm like, okay, write down as many of those words as you can remember. Right. And there will be one word missing from that list that it, like all the other words, just infer. And I'll predict. I will predict that a majority of you have written down ocean after my list of like waves, sand, like all these other words that aren't ocean, but connote ocean, right? And after I demonstrate this, after like a bunch of different things, I'm able to say like, so our memory is not this weird, perfect film that we rewind and go over. It is this loose associative network of things that we reconstruct based on our vague understanding of what actually happened. And that's totally based on how much attention we paid to shit. So like memory is just like, as this relates to eyewitness testimony, it's this super vague, loosey-goosey, ethereal, chasing the dragon, not fully understood fucking phenomenon that, as it applies to jurisprudence or retributive justice or eyewitness testimony or the legal system, however broad or specific you want to apply it, it's misapplied. That's my perspective. Without bringing it down, hopefully that opened more topics of conversation than it closed down.
No, I absolutely.
Sometimes I talk with more
100%
authority than
agree
I
with
actually
you.
have.
No, I agree with you. We kind of hold eyewitness testimony at this point, down here, where we have, ever growing lists of evidences that carry more weight. Eyewitness testimony, however, is still probably the most influential, I think, the most impactful to jurists, because a picture can shock, of course, but we have a connection to people that is just inextricable, regardless of whether we dislike or despise or hate the person. We have a connection. So there is a sense in which, when you have eyewitness testimony, the level of influence it has over somebody listening to that versus just holding up a picture or saying this is the process is just so much greater. It has so much more sway, which is why defense attorneys or prosecutors, depending on the situation, will put up the crying widow, or the person, they say, don't smile too much, appear like, remorseful or hurt or things like that, right? And that's all trained because we know how impactful that can be in deciding which way the coin flips, as opposed to all the empirics that we can bring to it. The DNA evidence, or the weapon, or the shirt, or the pictures, or the video. Like you can take a video, right? You can have a video of a person stabbing another person, and that is going to be less impactful than the person who's accused of stabbing telling those people that he was in another state, right? Even though they're watching it right in front of them.
Yeah.
It's still going to be less impactful.
Well, so it seems, I mean, we appear to be hardwired to give the greatest weight to what we're told by another human being, despite the fact that we're now really quite aware it is the weakest form of evidence. I mean, now it is, people talk about circumstantial evidence, but circumstantial evidence is evidence really based on something that has pulled out that human element, the human bias. So circumstantial evidence is evidence like DNA. DNA is circumstantial evidence. If you have somebody's blood all over a house, you don't have an eyewitness that says that somebody was murdered there. But if there's more blood there than a human body can function without, we know somebody was murdered there. It's circumstantial, but nonetheless, and it should be more powerful than the person who says, "Well, I didn't hear anything in that house. I didn't, nothing happened there." But it doesn't. We somehow seem far more wired to engage with what we hear and see other people say, and to trust what we're being told, as opposed to what we're seeing logically and what we can connect the dots with ourselves. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. We have what's known as direct evidence in a court system. And this is the type of evidence that is basically, you don't need to infer anything from this. And yet, circumstantial hearsay can sway over direct evidence. And that's basically how we would sum that up. Which again is why we should not be really, you put a man in jail for 20 years over hearsay, and you can't get that time back. You can't unkill a person, and you can't rewind the clock, which is why the criminal justice system just needs so much reform.
Well,
that's a whole other conversation, right? The idea of retributive justice versus rehabilitative models, right? Like all of that, that's another conversation, which I think is fun. But let's shelve that for right now. And focus on like the idea that same thing happens, 12 people see it, 12 different interviews, 12 different events.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what the episode's core was to me.
Yeah.
Right? Regardless of the 8.9% accuracy of the hologram, like, okay, so everything's playing within that 8.9%. That actually makes sense. From a psychological perspective. All the differences between men and women on intelligence and personality factors is within like 1%. So it's like, okay, so that's fun. They applied a statistic to it. Like, okay, those nerds like me that kind of smelled that, like, oh, okay, margin of error. Oh, I see. Oh, good.
Okay.
Very nice. Data.
Very nice. Very nice.
It's nice. I like it.
It's nice.
So like I appreciated it, like all kidding aside. I can see how people can sink their teeth into this bullshit. But,
notice how it's still a backhanded compliment, but okay.
Just not anyone I know.
All right. So, okay, you were talking about what you did like about it, and I guess the one that I've heard that I like is, 12 different people witnessed it. You're going to get 13 versions of what happened.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. Yeah, exactly. What really happened is somewhere in between. And psychology, social psychology classes take advantage of this, right? Where somebody is a proxy, they come in, or not a proxy, a confederate, I should say. And they come in and they steal a purse from somebody who, like is in on it. So you have two confederates, and then the professor asks, okay, what did that person look like? What were they wearing? And you get from this class of, 100 students, if it's an intro class, like 100 level, you get like 100 different variations. Like some people think they were black. Some people think they were white. Some people think they were a person of color. That was neither. Some people thought they were wearing a red shirt. Some people thought they were wearing a red jacket with a black shirt. Like that is the most compelling evidence to me that like eyewitness testimonies just should be shelved. The whole legal system should, and this is the conversation that we should be having, Vox. The whole legal system should be tweaked to include all of these psychological. Oh, fuck. I'm trying to think while I have the alarm going on over there. All these psychological blind spots. That's the word I want. Let me go while I take care of this thing over here.
All right. So I had a story I wanted to tell, a brief story, but it can wait till any time in this. So is there something you wanted to say? And we had Godless Mama on to discuss prison reform. I think we should discuss it again because it's an issue I've also actually written about to some extent. So I co-authored the memoir of a prison psychologist who was a Supermax at a Supermax facility, Walpole, in Massachusetts for 10 years. And he's got some stories that'll give you nightmares. But I met a few people who give you some nightmares too. But we should definitely discuss that. But I did have a quick story I wanted to tell, unless there was something in particular you wanted to jump in on while we're
no, go ahead.
Well, no, this was just. So I've always had a pretty good memory, and it's interesting how much my
bullshit.
memory has. What? Who invited him back? I've always had a very good memory for certain kinds of things. Let me finish the story and then call
You have
bullshit
the
or
worst
not.
memory. You have the worst memory.
Yes,
You told
recently
me the same story 8 times.
I'm
as if it was
aware. I'm
brand
aware.
new.
I'm aware. Give me a fucking break.
Oh,
So,
memory's a horror show.
Yeah, no, especially recently, my memory last year or two, my memory has taken a very serious southern dive, but that's neither here nor there. Typically in the past, I've had a very good memory. And it was such that, my wife and I, here was the thing. It was such that my wife and I would get into an argument, and then 8 years later, she'd contradict a point she made in that argument and say, oh, okay, so I was right. And I'd continue the argument as if it was just because I'd remember the entire argument. And she thought it wasn't true. And then she went back into her journal. She's like, oh my God, here's the argument. I was continuing the actual. It makes it difficult for people to get along with me up until again recently, where my memory's not been so good. But because I don't shut that off, and it just keeps going. But I was in college, and it was my freshman or junior year, freshman or sophomore year in college, and I decided to just start keeping a journal. And I was keeping it both because a lot of things were happening with my family, things were changing. And I don't even really remember why. I guess I really wanted to keep a journal. And I remember after about 8 months of keeping it, I got into a dispute with a friend of mine, and a friend and I just sort of we parted company. And I was talking to a third friend, and I said, wow, after they did this, this, and this, and this. And they said, well, that didn't really happen that way. Yeah, it did. Like, well, that's not quite how you told it the first time around. I was like, this is how it happened. And if you want, I got my journal. I can go back to it. I said, well, why don't you do that? Because I kept it. It was really detailed. And I go back, and they were right. They were right. And that was a real shock to me, because I had always, and I was getting my BA in psychology. So I had heard many times how we rewrite our own. I mean, I had heard it, but I was like, yeah, but I don't do that, or at least I don't do that as much as other people. And here was in my own hand proof that I had done it, and really quite significantly. And I had rewritten it to favor myself in ways that I hadn't even really comprehended. And I was just like, that was a shock that I will never forget. And it's given me a lot more hesitation since, because I would have bet my life that it had, and if it wasn't for a third person telling me to go back and check it, if I hadn't have been keeping detailed notes just on everything I was doing in my life, I was keeping a journal, and I wanted it. I was just everything I was thinking, feeling, everything that was happening. It was really extensive, and I go back and I was just like, oh shit, this happened differently, and it's close enough that I can see why I thought what I did, but it's far enough that it would be salient to a lot of people, the differences. And
that's important, because like this
experience.
Particular Star Trek episode, between the many different stories, one of them is a guy getting his ass kicked and a guy kicking ass.
Yeah.
Same person.
So yeah.
Depending on the story, right?
Well, and if this wasn't around a murder, nobody would really care the differences, and everybody would walk away with different interpretations and different, but there's nuance. What I like is also the nuance of how, one thing is said, and
damn, Nick is gone. So now this is my show. Welcome to where's the camera? No, Vox, I'm gonna bounce you unless you want to be my. God damn it! Fuck. And that's the end of the Vox Maute hour. It was about to get really good.
Yes.
Like concise.
It really was.
Points,
You remember?
No bloviating.
No, yeah.
Right. It was basically going to be like the Man Show. Except
listen, I'm sure if I drop out, the bloviation factor goes down by about 80 to 85%. But, anyways, everybody gets the point. I'll stop bloviating. Everybody gets the point. I really that was.
Get it? Jeez, you like Star Trek?
Oh Jesus. Oh. Wow. I am going to rat you out to Steve. I'm sure if he does, I am sending this episode to him. I am sending him a copy of this.
That's fine. Steve Shives?
Yes.
Bring it. Bring it. This was horrible. But then again, Steve Shives, he likes wrestling. He likes WWE stuff. So he's all in with the suspend disbelief versions of narratives that are stupid.
I really hope that Star Trek isn't. Well, we'll see. So Vox, the other one I wanted to introduce him to, but who knows, maybe not, is Duet, which is DS9. So you're a DS9 fan. You could tell me what you think of Duet, because that was the other one we were thinking of doing this with. But now I don't know. He may not be invited.
Can you remind me what Duet is?
The Cardassian war criminal gets picked up, and Kira. That one's actually also cheesy, but I thought very powerful. Kira is interrogating.
Yeah, and it is a little bit cheesy.
Is interrogating the war criminal. But
it's worth watching though.
The guy with the horrible fucking special effects makeup has wronged in some way another guy or gal in other horrible face makeup, because apparently that is the only difference between species.
Oh shoot, I think he got disconnected. I don't know how he got disconnected there. I don't know what happened. Please ignore the fact that I just reached for something with my mouse. That's circumstantial evidence that I had anything to do with him getting booted from the stream.
And then they have nothing but a difference in goddamn face makeup. That's the only difference. Humans through and through, except one of them has a big nose and one of them barely has a nose and one has scales on his nose. That's the difference in fucking humanoid species in the goddamn future. They They thought it through like...
You're aware that some of this makeup goes back to the 70s, right? I mean, there is such a thing as...
it goes back somewhere.
Well, there is the great, and I know we haven't really hammered down on anything yet, but there is the great meme of Star Trek pushing the boundaries, being willing to take on social issues that no one is being taken on before, and willing to glue anything to a baby at any time.
Yes,
which is hey, first interracial kiss on television.
First time the N-word was used on a live television broadcast during that particular time hour.
You're preaching to the choir. It has the trappings of a very good monumental piece worthy of actually emulating and moving forward in some way, shape, or form. Hey man, I understand why people go to Applebee's, just not anyone I know.
Plenty of people asshole. Plenty of people Half the people you hang out
doesn't
with.
Mean you're plenty of people.
Steve, me, for fuck's sake, half the people in how many people in our Discord that you enjoy hanging out with?
I seriously hope Steve Shives never fucking sees this episode.
I've already sent him the link. I have downloaded this. If this gets demonetized and pulled down, it's recorded. It's
explaining to do.
So there are some.
But
I
really didn't like it. Let me be perfectly honest. It was really
we hadn't figured out. We haven't. You were too subtle for me. All right. So you didn't like it.
There's some other things that we can talk about in here, though. We can talk about. We can talk about how postmodernism has started to really become a thing, and we can talk about the postmodernism in this particular episode, where Riker comments that both stories cannot be true at the same time, and Deanna comments that they are both true to the individual as they remember it from their perspective. And so this is a real good display of when we use the word truth, right? What does that mean? What is it? And so we've heard people clap back when someone such as myself will say, well, I'm living my truth. You live your truth, I'll live my truth. But wait, there can only be one truth, right? And of course, the answer to that is no. There are multiple truths depending on which frame of reference you're coming from, the environment that frame of reference comes from as well, and so on and so forth. And it was very subtle, right? They said it as the way Diana spoke about it. It was just a fact. She just said it as a fact. And back then, right, today that's no big thing. But back then, when this episode aired, say like the 1980s, the idea that one person could have their truth and another person could have their truth was very, very controversial. This is when like critical theory was still kind of in its infancy, so to speak, and there's a big attack on postmodernism. So that's an interesting aspect of this episode. And then, of course, getting back to just the different perspectives, the question becomes, and not just in a legal aspect, but in our interpersonal relationships with other people. How do we get at what actually happened? Do we? Because there's always been this big kind of
see, that's the angle I like, right? Because back then the intersectional or critical theory idea of social, of social science, those theories weren't really popular, but even those theories, I think, tap into a deeper philosophical problem that this episode taps into, which is the idea that everybody brings to an event their lived experience, and that shapes and frames the way that they will remember it. And I think that's the core, that's the nugget of this episode for me. And that's fun to talk about, right? Because like what did we experience? What is our lived experience that my favorite is, and we're going to do an episode on Rorschach, which is the whole idea that humans are just this projective medium that we bring our lived experience and project onto, right? So I'm going to use that kind of as even though we're going to be having that hang a little bit later in the month, I'm going to use like one of my favorite examples, which is like Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson just seems, I know, exactly, right? People have the craziest opinions about this motherfucker. But what I find interesting is, depending on what experience you're bringing to hearing what he has to say, that shapes whether or not you are going to have a good faith or bad faith interpretation of what's going down, because he is flawed. He is flawed in beyond a heroic sense in his own framing. But that being said, we could bring so many different experiences let me rephrase that. We could bring so many different perspectives based on our experiences to any single event. It renders the truthiness with a capital T of that event like completely vague. It puts it up for grabs as an uncertainty. Truth is uncertain. That's uncomfortable.
Well, and so if I may to frame it in a slightly different way, it sounds like what you're saying. I mean, in any encounter that we have, we only have a piece of the information. When we're speaking to someone, when we're listening,
we make the most crucial decisions based on incomplete data.
Yes, and so we have to fill that data in somehow, because we have to make judgment calls. We have to move forward. We can't be paralyzed by the fact that we don't have all the information. So we have to fill it in.
Psychology is way more valuable than philosophy.
Whoa! Okay, hold on. Whoa! Oh, just that happened again. I don't know how that happened. That just keeps happening. We're having technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. I gotta stop.
Oh my god! Oh my god! The top ceiling of philosophy is the bottom floor of psychology. Everything that philosophers want to understand introspectively is borne out through the empirical science of psychology. Psychology is nothing but experimental philosophy.
As a physicalist, I'm gonna have to sign off on what Maddie just said.
Whoa!
You weren't expecting that one, were you?
A2?
Well,
Oh,
I mean, if we
man,
really
I'm
think about
loving
it,
this.
if we
I'm gonna
really,
mute.
I love the, I love the,
Okay.
but I mean, if we really think about it, philosophy can only take us so far, right? Philosophy is, I mean, I think it's fair to say that everything is born out of philosophy, but philosophy is what gets us to the progression of things. Without philosophy, we cannot have social sciences. Without philosophy, we cannot have psychology. Without philosophy, we cannot have science of any kind. Without philosophy, we cannot have language or anything like. But
We,
those
yeah,
things describe the philosophy is what gets us to the ability to have those things, and then those things take us to the place where we begin to understand, like what. So philosophy tells us what it means to be an agent. Philosophy tells us the conditions that are necessary to be considered an agent, but philosophy cannot tell us the lived experience of an agent. It can't. So it can tell us what an agent is, but then we need psychology to tell us about the lived experience of an agent, which is the part that is important to us, because if we don't understand the lived experience of the agent, then we cannot properly form a society around agents.
so without philosophy, we would not be able to have, say, a smug sense of self-superiority and self-satisfaction. That would not be possible without philosophy, is what you're saying.
Oh no, that requires psychology.
Actually,
well, listen,
psychologists can look at philosophers and go, "That is the cutest fucking crossword puzzle that you are engaged in." When you're ready to look at things where the rubber hits the road, then welcome to
well,
psychology.
and that's the thing, right? So philosophy is the ivory tower. So try to imagine philosophy is the ivory tower. It's where the
I don't grant that at all, because that means in some way, shape, or form, psychology is not in the ivory towers.
no, he thinks it's the
well,
ivory basement, is what he's
the ivory basement. Well, sure. So I mean, I think I'm going to go in a reverse direction from there, though, because I think psychology is the practical application of the metaphysic, right? And so we have the discussion about the metaphysic, what these things are, where they come from, are they real, are they platonic, non-platonic, do we ascribe some kind of error theory to it? But then once we've gone on that, once we've ran around the tree, then we have to apply it. Right. And by the way, this is why, at least for me, I think we see such a stark difference between European philosophy and European psychology and American philosophy and American psychology, where American philosophy really, really champions Charles Peirce, right, and pragmatism. And we kind of, and that just kind of, I think, at least from the American perspective, is why there's so much of a disconnect, where Europe is still really holding on to this kind of, you know what? I don't even know what the hell Europe is holding on to at this point.
well, let me try to frame it in another way, which is that basically it all starts on some level with philosophy, but philosophy today, and always has been, what's left over after something grows out of it. So when, philosophy is in fact the basement of all of these things, because philosophy is where psychology starts. But then when psychology starts to become its own thing and begins to have empirical results in one way or another, it's no longer philosophy. It has grown out of philosophy and become something else. So when we're trying to understand philosophical problems today, whatever we're trying to answer philosophically, what makes a human being, so that we can understand, is abortion murder, is it not murder? These are philosophy until we start to make progress and it becomes another discipline. If that, sorry, is that wasn't me this time.
Let me go take care of the rice that's just done,
all right.
And then I'm made of opinions right now.
Okay, I'm scared. I'm scared. I will confess to being Yeah, this is the strangest episode of Star Trek today. Yeah. Well, and so I did want to get back into because we were talking about, so you always have incomplete data, and so you have to take assumptions into that data that you see, and we can get very resistant to changing those assumptions. But you know,
Sure.
in this episode, Manua had very basic assumptions about her husband that she refused to challenge, like he'd never try to commit murder. So when she gets a certain set of facts, it becomes very difficult to see anything outside of that. But you have to bring some assumptions to the table. We won't get into Hume's problem of induction, but it literally goes that far back. I mean, if you want to go as far back as to how many assumptions that are really unjustifiable you have to make, we can go that far back. You're going to be stuck somewhere in life with making assumptions. There is a universe of infinite complexity that our very, very, very finite minds are trying to understand. So we make assumptions based on how we view the world, and then try to fit everything into that box, and are very resistant to changing the shape or size of that box to fit facts that don't comfortably go into that. Does that make sense or seem?
Absolutely. I've always said that the true mark of a genius is the ability to freely step outside your box. And it's a very rare thing for someone to be able to acknowledge their own biases and then be able to ignore those biases when coming to a conclusion about a specific set of facts. And generally speaking, it's fairly easy to do if you have a prior methodology. You know, if you're doing math or something like that, you know, you can always kind of go back. But when it comes to humans or something outside of that, it becomes much more difficult. So the ability to set aside those biases, I think, is really the mark of what it means to be an intelligent person. When you can, for instance, for me, of course, I was raised being indoctrinated that the color of my skin meant that I was better than.
And could you refresh people's memory on where you were raised?
I was raised in Cape Town, South Africa.
During apartheid.
Yes, and of course the joke with me is that I left South Africa in 1993 for absolutely no political reasons. But I've had to deal with that all my life, and I call myself a reformed racist. I'm always, I think, going to be a racist, but I no longer allow those things to interfere with my judgment of people. And so that's where setting aside those biases comes from, because
No. I have a brand new idea.
Okay.
Oh, now I'm scared. Hold on. Okay, hold on. All right, could just for the audience of In Time, everyone just brace yourselves.
No.
And okay.
The best idea ever. I swear to God, you're gonna love this.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
We're gonna talk more about psychology and philosophy in a show where we're allowed to get a hot second. Can I get a hot second? As soon as anybody says that, they're allowed 2 uninterrupted minutes, right? And they're allowed whatever, like 3 of them, 5 of them in the 90-minute conversation. We're going to disagree, right? Because I agree with you, Nick, about wait, let me see. I agree with you, Nick, about a couple of things, and you, Vox, about a couple of things, and I disagree with you, Vox, about a couple of things, and I disagree with you, Nick, about a couple of things. And we should have that conversation, but you be like, well, I need a hot second. I need a hot second.
All right. We'll have a
2 minutes of just being able to bibbidi bop uninterrupted. How you feel about this?
I'm on board. I'm game.
A whole show about this. Psychology, philosophy, bibbidi bop.
See if we can.
Sounds good to me.
Oh, perfect.
All right, good. You're both going to go down.
I
in
I,
history
I highly
as the
I,
losers.
I highly doubt that. You know a lot more about psychology than I
And
do.
the
but at
best
least
part is,
I got the BAs
best
in
part
both.
is, if we do this hang more than once, we'll invite people in to just like, I'm the expert in psychology between the three of us, right? We'll invite people in that'll just be like, Maute's wrong for these reasons. I need a hot second. 2 minutes, bam.
There is always somebody who is more authoritative than the next person.
Well, and I think there's
the big fish, right? It's always a bigger fish.
Yeah.
And
Always bigger fish.
And let me deduce that down to the smaller statement, which is there's always somebody who's more informed than Maute.
Rarely. You mispronounce rarely.
Oh boy. All right. Well, you know what? I think this has been a spectacular discussion, a little off topic, but I think largely on topic too. So is there anything else anybody wanted to, so we can start to wrap this up? And I realized too, the monetization was off until just now. So if anybody wanted to super chat, you can. If not, if you wanted to run away screaming, I totally understand. I'm kind of on that sentiment too. But but I really do like it. I think this sets up our Rorschach episode, which actually it's not later in the month. It's on the 16th at 8 p.m. The Rorschach episode, where we're going to be, yes, I'm looking forward to that.
If you're available for that, love you on that one.
I'll be here.
Perfect.
Because we're going to be talking about essentially the same thing, right? So this is 3 perspectives on the same event. Imagine if it weren't an event and it was a person. I think the same rules apply. What our lived experience is that we bring to that event or person, right? I will reintroduce Jordan Peterson into the conversation, much to the chagrin.
That's like I have that reaction whenever, and I'll tell you why. I actually think Jordan Peterson, his work, when he doesn't get into when he's not trying to like compete with Sam Harris, who's another. But when he's not trying,
so many conversations with you about this, because not only do I subscribe to Sam Harris, I also subscribe to his meditation app. Also, from a psychological perspective, I think that Jordan Peterson has value for reasons that have nothing to do with his shitty political opinions.
Yeah. It's just I have Jordan.
Let's
Peterson.
work out you having her on your on Atheish or something, because I think that would be a spectacular.
No, because I want to say some really fucked up shit, and I don't want to be responsible for it.
you want us to get deep?
I want to say some really irresponsible shit.
Okay.
But I get
do it on your channel, Nick, if that's okay.
We wouldn't expect anything
too much of an ask.
From you. Yeah,
Overreach.
So this just happened to me last night. I was in a hang, and I had Jordan Peterson and critical race theory shoved down my throat by a concrete worker. And I don't mean to like disparage concrete workers, but this guy was dumber than the concrete he was laying. And he and he's just like, that this is what he said to me. Almost as verbatim as I can remember it. Perspective, memory, right? Okay. As best as I can relate it, he basically said, the left in America is overburdened by religion and appeals to tradition and dogma, while the right is a factually based organization that rejects these postmodern critical race theory people. And because of that, we can just know that because we value facts over feelings, we should go with the right in this country. And Jordan Peterson agrees.
Oh, dear Lord. Well, if Jordan Peterson agrees,
I have had so much Jordan Peterson shoved down my throat from the right wing. And, for a very, very long time, I resisted watching, reading anything about Jordan Peterson. He was like Kermit the Frog to me. I didn't care. But at some point I just had to investigate what it was. And I of course stumbled across the fact he's famous because he wanted to misgender somebody. That's why you're famous.
Yeah, well, wasn't it one episode of Bill Maher? Nobody had ever heard of him until one, and I have never seen anything he's actually. I have never heard a complete thought from him. I've heard him on occasion speak, and I haven't. But so everyone talks about him, and I think I am where you were, which is I haven't. I know he's controversial. I heard GM Skeptic talking about him and making fun of the Kermit the Frog voice, and I've heard a few things, and I'm like, maybe I don't know enough about, but it's wow. You mentioned his name, and all of a sudden.
The last thing that I want is to be represented as a Jordan Peterson apologist. Right. I think that he has, just like the episode of Rorschach that we're going to be having on In Time coming up, I think that he is a pastiche of ambiguous signals that could be read differently, depending on what experience you bring to what's being said. That's the phenomenon of gaslighting. It's the phenomenon of dog whistling. It's the phenomenon of good faith versus bad faith, charitable versus uncharitable renditions of what's being said, context, all of that, right? Whether how stringent your purity cult is. Because if it's stringent enough, like nobody gets in. If it's loose enough, everyone gets in. What's the criteria? Yeah. That's for me, that's the question that eventually gets brought up when we have these Rorschach elements.
Well, I do think that, and I know we want to wrap this up, I do think that my favorite...
Well, I'll keep going. This is the most fun fucking conversation I could have.
I do think that my favorite bit about Jordan Peterson came from the Dave Rubin debate between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, in which Sam Harris informs Jordan Peterson that he's not Luke Skywalker. And I think that is, I mean, that just did it for me right there. Like, you're not Luke Skywalker, right?
That is actually perfect. No complaints. Best ever. Best ever.
All right. Well, we will do. Okay, since I need education on Jordan Peterson, we will do a show on Jordan Peterson. Although what you just said sort of reflects what I've heard of him, which is that basically everyone from neo-Nazis to like Antifa to just they all think that he's their spokesman, and that he seems to be able to be ambiguous enough that he can be claimed by everybody, and that's where his popularity comes. And that's an interesting. It's like if he's managed to do that, and that when he's confronted, because he's even got at least some self-awareness that that's how he goes, he refuses to actually pick a side so that he can keep that up. Is my understanding.
Here's the debate that I would love to have.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Please.
It's super constricted. It's super operationalized. Jordan Peterson is wrong about most things, but not about the things that most people think that he's wrong about.
That would be a video that I think should be made and probably could go viral. And when I say viral, I mean in the community of people who care about these things, which means it's watched by 300 people.
All 300 of them. We're dozens strong.
That's a perfect size for us. So we'll here's the thing, and I got to be better about just writing down show ideas but now we got like three. We've got our hot second show idea for psychology. We'll just call it the hot second.
No, we'll incorporate all of them into the same show. It'll be the debate about Jordan Peterson being a shitty person, but not as shitty as everyone thinks, with the hot second rule in place.
Okay, we'll call that the hot mess show, and
the hot second mess.
The hot second mess. All right. So, all right. Well, does anyone else have anything else they wanted to say before we wrap this up? Because I have to get going. I appreciate the Maute can go forever, but I've got a family. And it's like I think we have a daddy somewhere.
Right. Well, I'll probably, I know that there's, I sent this link actually to two people, so I know they're watching, so I will say, say hello, Sydafrika, to those two people that are watching, and, with that, I'm good.
All right, and then Chris, anything that isn't, let me repeat, isn't critical of the episode, can we end on a positive note? Is that possible?
Yes.
Is there? I could. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Here's the positive note: a majority of people have never seen that episode. That's the most positive thing. Bam, bang your head. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been your episode of In Time.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been your episode.
I don't know what's going on. I do not know what's going on. The episode was beautiful. It was amazing. Millions of people have watched it. They're being very mean to me right now. They're being very.
Fucking yakety sacks.
It was the best episode. It was the best episode that has ever been. It was the best episode that we have aired. This was almost the best discussion we've ever had. Maute was the most contrarian.
Star Trek sucks.
Wow.
Like Star Trek. Everyone who likes Star Trek sucks.
We will be posting his name and address. We will have his name and address in the description.
Please don't ever align yourself with Star Trek weirdom. And if you do, fucking talk to Nick for a hot second.
oh, okay.
That means I have 2 minutes, right? 2 minutes.
No, we haven't started that rule yet. That's we're gonna. No, sorry. Nice try, sneaking that in. You don't get to wreck on the rule. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We will see you on the 16th at 8 p.m. for Rorschach. We may have Maute on, depending on whether he's out of the doghouse yet or not.
Star Trek sucks.
My guess is no. All right. Thank you all for joining us, and have a good night.